Hey there, old souls. As an extension of a conversation about the soul that we've been having lately, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the idea that the soul can not only live on after this life, but communicate back to those who are living. So the question remains, can we communicate with those who have died? Well, I'm going to share a little sociological reflection on this, and then you can just sort of decide whatever you want. The first thing to consider is that we find the phenomena of being visited by people who have passed on around the world and throughout time. Now, this phenomena can look a lot of different ways. Yes, it often happens in dreams, and we might be able to dismiss that as wishful thinking, or at least, if nothing else, a meaningful psychological personal composition. But the other thing that happens is that sometimes people actually see, feel, or hear the presence of people who have passed on while they're awake. My father, for example, while he was in the end stages of his journey with cancer, a man who was a devout rational materialist who had no use for religion and absolutely did not have a strong conviction or belief in anything obviously spiritual, and certainly wasn't a big fan of talking about the soul, he himself saw a waking, living vision of his own father coming to see him in the kitchen and communicating that things were going to be okay. So this raises the second point I wanted to make, which is whether it's a waking vision or a sleeping vision, what we find around the world and throughout time is the documentation that shows us that these experiences come to people who don't even believe it's true or possible. That's pretty interesting. Now, some could still argue that, well, that's just a deep psychological longing that's strong enough to even overcome our conditioning. Okay, fair enough. So here's a little more information to consider. In the research on the communication between those that have passed on and those that are alive, we also find a kind of perplexing and compelling history of evidence that shows that the communication can be factual, can be verifiable. In other words, we have all kinds of accounts, thousands upon thousands of accounts, in which someone who is reportedly dead comes to someone who is alive in a vision or a dream and tells them something, like something to invest in, or where something's hidden, or something they should do or not do. So sometimes it's the form of advice, and sometimes it's actually revealing something material, right, about a decision that they need to make, or something about the material world. That's pretty compelling. But here's the last thing that I wanted to share in this reflection. What if it doesn't matter? What if the sheer meaning and value of these encounters is self-substantiating enough? And by that I mean, if I have the feeling that a spirit is talking to me, and through that I open my psychological complexity, through that I access my intuition, through that I come to understand myself and my life in a better way, simply because the idea of a soul or a visiting soul has given me permission to do that. Isn't that enough? Isn't that powerful enough? Isn't that meaningful enough? There's no question, even for the scientific community today, that the world is fundamentally comprised of energy, that absolutely everything around us has a kind of energy signature, has a kind of bioenergetic field that can be measured and quantified and studied. We also know that energy, in terms of the physics definition, can communicate or convey heat and information. right? So energy is the conduit for the very video that you're watching right now. It's the very conduit for Wi-Fi signals and radio signals and cell phone signals, all vibration and frequency. So couldn't we also consider that perhaps, if nothing else, we are capable of feeling the energy of things? And that in feeling that energetic signature, that somehow the human being, the human brain, the human nervous system has the capacity to translate that energy into meaningful information, which would sound like communication, which would sound like guidance. And any way you cut it, I'd say it sounds like kind of a beautiful universe to live in, where we can stay connected to the energy of this world, stay connected to the energy of those that we love, and more than that, find meaning and guidance and healing through this deepening relationship with the invisible world, with the energetic world, and yes, with the world of souls. I don't know. It seems like something pretty important to dive into to me. If it were true for you, or if you were to take that to a deeper level, what would you do differently today? What would you do differently this week if you had absolute confidence and absolute total proof that the soul lives on beyond this life, and that it is absolutely possible to communicate with the energy of things and the consciousness of those that have passed? What would you tell them? What would you ask for? How would you listen and make yourself a better receiver? I invite you to consider these things today and try them out.